intern at NCC at the moment, and also is a Abertay University ethical hacker. So Ian's going to be speaking about some cool stuff that he's found in apps, and stuff that the apps probably shouldn't be saying. So
yeah, pretty much.
Over to Ian.
Cool. Hi everyone. As Duncan said, I'm Ian. I'm talking about apps. I am just going into my final year of ethical hacking and countermeasures at Abertay University. I'm the secretary of the Abertay Ethical Hacking Society. Abertay Hackers on Twitter. Give us a follow. Sometimes there's some tweets. Sometimes we forget. Organiser of Security, which is our annual conference. Quite good. I'm going to shamelessly plug it because my conference may as well get people to my one. I'm Smartacus on Twitter. So, research. Basically, we wanted to know what apps were saying that they weren't advertising that they were doing. Everyone knows that apps are saying more than they claim. Analytics from whatever companies to aid user experiences or whatever reasons people are saying. This article is actually a really old one. It's from January last year. Angry Birds and leaky phone apps targeted by NSA and GCHQ. So, big surprise, they're trying to get information from apps. And in this, they discussed people uploading photos to social networks and finding that from the information they had, people were able to get basically everything about you. The social media networks that they looked at, I actually can't remember which ones, were stripping all the metadata from images before it went public on the network, but it was still transmitted with the images in the first place. So if you could intercept the data, then you could get it before it was stripped by the social media. So again, points to them for trying, but it didn't really work. So we decided to have a look at some of the top 10 apps in each category and see what they're saying that they really probably shouldn't be. This is going to be a fairly quick talk because actually the research hasn't progressed quite as far as I hoped it would have done by this stage. It's still ongoing at the moment. We plan to cover Android and iOS. We've only managed iOS. But this is what we did. Basically, we looked up the top 10 apps, made a huge spreadsheet with them all in, because the top 10 apps are actually extremely fluid. We checked what was in the top 10, the next day looked again, and in one category, 4 of those top 10 we couldn't even find in the store anymore. So I don't know if they were malicious that had been found to be so or whatever, but yeah, we had a big list of them. Set them up to install, got coffee, drank coffee, realised that our Wi-Fi was really, really, really slow, got more coffee, tested those apps, uninstalled them and started the whole thing again. This was quite tedious, as you can probably imagine. The actual testing, we proxied an iPhone through Burp. So we just set Burp up to run an HTTP proxy, which is worth noting. Some apps we didn't find anything on it. It looks like they were communicating with other protocols. So there was no HTTP traffic, but there was obviously some communication going on. So that's part of future research, is trying to find out what they're doing. Load the app, click buttons, and hope stuff happened. This recon was all completely passive. So any accounts, any apps that wanted to sign in or wanted, yeah, basically just sign in was the only thing we didn't do. We used search functions, we'd go to login forms, we'd pretend we'd forgotten our passwords but not submit anything, just to see what was actually being sent before you give it any information actively. Obviously once you've given it your information, they can use it as they wish. And then close the app, reset the phone, so make sure there's nothing running in the background, clear Burp, and then start again. I'm going through these slides way too quickly. We ended up with 1.4 gigabytes worth of Burp logs, 228 items from the it's been about that number of apps. There were some duplicates. Top 10 from each of the categories. We found some really interesting stuff, not even from an analytics point of view. The next app, this was an app that was designed to teach children to read, and this was how they protected their in-app payments. Instead of using a nice password, they put 3 numbers and said, type these because this is totally great in an app that teaches kids to read. There's no way they'll be able to read the numbers and then type them. Don't know how effective that is for them. I'm sure it probably works. And then we realised that we had a problem because we had all of these Burp logs, and they were quite tricky to parse. I had however many hundred, and I thought it's great. You can just extract the files. We can because Burp files are just zip files, so you can unzip them and then read the file that comes out. So I tried that, wrote a wee script to go through them, and it came back with nothing. So I rewrote it, and it came back with 1 or 2 requests from each of them, but nowhere near the levels of data that we were expecting. There were, I think, from the 200 odd captures, we ended up pulling out about 17 requests doing it that way, and that's definitely very wrong. So the solution was to go through all of these captures manually. If anyone knows of a better way of doing this, please let me know after the talk, because this took ages. Each capture went through it again, selected all the items in the proxy history, saved them as an XML file, moved on to the next one, realised the Burp was using all my RAM, rebooted my machine, did it again. This took about a week. Great fun. So, sorted. Requests are all in a nice XML file that we could quite easily go through. Nice and easy to parse because it's XML, so Python library, we used ICE Beautiful Soup for that. Should be great. Kind of, apart from because there were null bytes in a lot of the requests and responses, Beautiful Soup was basically crashing halfway through. So everything was base64 encoded, which isn't that bad because base64 is easy to deal with. But what we then found was that some URLs and responses were base64 again. So we had to go through everything all over again and see if it was base64 at that time, trying to decode it, realise it wasn't, or trying to find out what was actually being said. So as I said, wrote a Python script, went through all of the log files first of all, and it just went through, checked all of the requests to see what they were. The first stage was to see how many hosts each app connected to, see who it's talking to, see if there's any crossover between them, which is just metadata, so it doesn't really tell you anything that interesting. Wrote that to MySQL database and saved that for future processing. Some of the numbers we got from that, 8,855 requests, which is quite a lot given that we weren't running the apps for that long and we weren't even signing in. Some of the apps we found were sending maybe 1 or 2 requests, and it was either a certificate pin, so you could get absolutely nothing from the apps, because Burp would obviously fail, or it was saying, no, you can't get any data until you've signed in through your Apple account, Facebook account, Twitter account, whatever they required for signing. So those were no use, which has made some of these numbers maybe slightly inaccurate because the calculations haven't taken into consideration the overall number of apps that we couldn't communicate. The total hosts connected to was about 620, 618 exactly there. That was quite a lot for 200 apps, we thought. And then the total host app pairings, this is every time one app connected to one host, that counts as a pairing. When it connected to the same host again, it wasn't counted anymore. What we found was a lot of apps were talking to multiple hosts, a lot of hosts were connected to by a lot of apps. And also, I realised that I don't know how to do databases, and I made a typo. The average of 8 is 8. Who knew? So if you ever need to know what that is, nice SQL function for it. A bit more in-depth details here. On average, each app, 1.7 apps talk to each host. I think I may have written these slides the wrong way around. Oh no, that's right. So on average, each app actually talks to, I think the numbers are wrong way around, definitely. No, that's right. Apps connected to, on average, 7 separate hosts when you're on them, which seems quite high to me. The highest one app was connecting to 34 different services. So I thought maybe it's like subdomains of the same thing. So if it's a host and they've got static and a different domain for their, I don't know, CSS and one for their images and so on, but it wasn't. This one was connecting to, I think it was 4 different CDNs, a bunch of subdomains of their own stuff, and also 6 or 7 different analytics companies, which is excessive, if you ask me. I'm not an app developer, I don't know how they're using that data, maybe they need it. The categories, these are the top, however many there are there, 10-ish, categories from the by count of hosts connected to. This is taking the top 10 as a whole, not each individual app. So again, these numbers might be a bit skewed. I think finance actually, I think, should be higher up that chart based on what we saw, because we actually only tested 4 apps in the finance section. And between 4 of them, they were connecting to the 54 posts, which is a lot given that they were banking apps or transaction apps or whatever other finance apps there are. They seem quite noisy for what they do. Lifestyle included apps like shopping apps, a couple of magazines in there. I guess I can kind of see why they're getting content from a lot of places, but still the jump from weather to lifestyle is quite ridiculous there. And more details. The most connected to host that we found was iTunes.apple.com. Big surprise, we're testing on an iOS device. A lot of them were trying to get, if they had in-app purchases, that was done through the App Store, and the apps would work, and then throw an error trying to connect to the App Store to get the in-app purchases, or links to other apps that they had. So if a developer had multiple apps and they put adverts to it in the same thing, then they have a click here to download my other app, and you click that, certificate failure. Probably nothing that useful in there. The next 2 were analytics providers. Scorecard Research and Flurry, which is an analytics service for mobile app developers. I don't know if there's any developers in here who've used it. No. Cool. It was horrific to deal with because all of the requests are really weirdly encoded, and then, you know when you go through, you accidentally cap a binary in Linux, and then you Control-C it halfway through and your terminal ends up in Japanese or something. That happened basically every time my script ran, which made things a bit more difficult to deal with. These are the next top 4. So Flurry I've just mentioned. Advertising, Google Analytics, and another tracking one. All of these were connected to by multiple apps. Another part of my future research is to see what overlap there is. So if we look at the 19 connections to each of those 2 providers, it'd be interesting to see how many apps are speaking to both of them and how many apps are choosing to just use one, to see if there's any implicit benefit of using one over the other, if there's something that one's not providing, so it's turning people towards the other one maybe, or if they just like collecting all the data they possibly can. Redundancy, I'm not really sure. So now, the request that we saw, this is an average request, just an HTTP GET, nothing, it looks a bit messy, but the important bits, we have a unique identifier, it looks like that. That looks like a UUID of some variety. Wasn't able to work out what this did, but we also have, you're using an iPhone 6. Maybe not that useful information, kind of, you can see what devices people are using, helps you develop for screen resolutions or whatever. iOS version in the user agent, you see that an awful lot. That's kind of useful, I guess, how often people are upgrading, how long you need to support old OSs. Good analytics. This was in a sports app for leaderboards and what football team's winning and who's winning what and so on. That's a lot more information that was sending. So what we found there is you've got the app name first of all, the iOS version. The next one is the action that you made in the app. Every single time you click a button, then that's sent off again. User flow tracking, I guess, and then the iPhone 6 process name, version of the iOS and the application itself, and then radio equals Wi-Fi. This one we found could tell you what Wi-Fi network could say you're on Wi-Fi, or I wasn't able to test this myself, but I believe that if you're on a phone network, it actually says radio equals and then phone network name. I can kind of see the use of a developer wanting to know if you're on Wi-Fi or phone network, but I don't really see why the developers of applications need to know what network you're on and what mast you're connected to and whatever else they try and get. And also whether you're using the phone in portrait or landscape at the end there, which, I don't know, might be useful to them, but again, it seems a bit excessive. A weather app here, this was another one that was quite loud. The interesting bits here, you've got the app, the server it's connecting to the name of the application, you're on iOS, and then I have no idea what this was. It looks like a connection key of some variety. We saw an awful lot of these API keys. You know, developers build an API and go, oh, these authenticators will stick a static key in. A couple of tests showed that it was just a static key across installs, across devices. So, interesting way to go if you want to be secure, just use static keys. Probably going to work, no one's ever going to use that badly. Again, radio equals Wi-Fi. And last run and app runs, I found them quite interesting. This changed based on the last run, put in the time and date that you last used the app, and then app runs, how often you've used it. So I'm assuming that's for if you know those games you get that say, hey, you've not played for a while, why not? You should probably come back and play because it's the one I've got. Your cubes miss you and it'll be a great one. Tries to guilt trick you into playing more. And then a unique visitor ID, which was not persistent across installs in a lot of cases, but sometimes it seemed to be, so I don't know exactly how it was calculating this. And then down the bottom, it's not actually highlighted, we have iOS if the screen reader is active as well, so they can find out whether your phone's talking to you throughout.
Ian, just as part of that, did you ever at any point track some of the details from the phone, like the name of the device and so on, and look for that within the data? Or
We did look for
Wi-Fi
that.
names?
Annoyingly, Apple are actually really good at this. I think in one of these, yeah. This is a request here tries to get your MAC address, and Apple go, nope, not getting it, not allowed, can't have it. Part of the research that we wanted to do, as I said, was the Android apps. And I've got a feeling that either quite an old version of iOS or Android apps would be giving away a lot more information, just because of the permission models. Apple, I don't particularly like or use iPhones very often, but I know that they have got quite good lately at refusing permissions like device ID. And actually another one that's not highlighted here. Old DID, I'm assuming that's device ID, don't actually know, but again another unavailable written there. So it looks like some of these apps are actually trying to get your device ID and send that off. This was to an ad network. And actually there's more analytics data in the ad networks than there seems to be in the analytics. One that we found, location. So this was an app that used a secure API to communicate with the likes of Foursquare and your other What's in My Area services. They advertised as being secure when they did this, and as far as I can tell, they may well be secure between their server and Foursquare servers. But whenever you say, hey, I'm in the middle of Manchester, find me a hotel, or find me some food, it says that in a plain HTTP request. So that's your exact location to a reasonable number of decimal places. And then, so that, I guess you can kind of let them away with that, they actually want to use your location. This was an ad request, another big advertising company that were getting a lot of requests to them. Nothing really, well, a lot of stuff there that's encoded somehow, didn't really decode it. It looks like it's just URL encoded, didn't have time to decode it. It says you're in Manchester, that makes sense, targeted advertising, hey, go to this new restaurant in Manchester. Another ad company, the same one actually, send your location to, what's that, 15 decimal places, so they know where you are to within the millimeter, something like that. I don't know the exact numbers. I know that one decimal place can be out about a few miles, and 2 decimal places can be out about, I don't know, half a mile or something. They really don't need that level of accuracy to say, hey, you want to go to a shop. This was another interesting one. Any app that had embedded maps connected to Apple's map server. Great, Apple Maps. I don't know if this is actually useful. I thought I'd put it in just out of interest. This seems to depend on the tiles that are being viewed, and there are some keys there that are sending tile requests. I don't know whether it could actually be useful to someone, because when you load up the app, if it was, say, a food chain, you want to know where the nearest restaurant was, and it'll say, hey, the nearest one is here, and then it immediately starts pulling down map tiles based on your location. Not really, as I say, sure, it's another thing that needs to be looked into. If you can use that to work out where someone is, or the areas they're looking at going, or if it's some arbitrary thing that only Apple can decode. I wouldn't be surprised either way, having seen what we've seen here. this was the other one, Google Analytics. As I say, we didn't sign into any applications here, so I don't know if this changes based on your actual username. But that sent test user, which is what I was signed in as at the time, because that's what the app by default signed in as. If it is sending your username the whole time, it's probably not great, especially given that a lot of these analytics were using certificate pinning, great, but it was failing open. So it went, oh no, it's not pin certificate. Oh, it's probably fine. We'll trust this guy. Trying to think what others. Yeah, an awful lot of the applications, 90% of them are probably just sending everything in plain. And the rest of them, we saw a few that were going, right, I'll use HTTPS because it's secure and we'll do it properly, and then just kind of ignoring the certificates. The big red, oh no, it's a button that I shouldn't click, and so yeah, it's fine. So yeah, I really have flown through this. This was a quick talk. Some thoughts that we came up with. Apps are talking an awful lot, as I said, about 9,000 requests from the top couple hundred apps. And that's not even from all the ones, because a lot of them we couldn't intercept the requests from, because there were some who were doing things properly. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. There's an awful lot that goes on we couldn't see. I was speaking to Adam about this actually, and he came up with the point that maybe the analytics companies are securing things so that people like us can't see what's going on. It's not so that your data's, they're stealing all your data, but they want to be careful about it. It's so that people that are going to sit and poke about an app and find out what it's doing can't actually find out what it's saying about you, so that we don't turn around and go, oh, look at them, they're stealing our data, they're evil people. Some requests, we can see that they're obfuscated in ways that I didn't have time to try and work out. Some of them are encoded through, we found a few that were sending what looked like zip files. Base64'd, and then Base64'd again. So another thing on the to-do list is to go through them and see what's actually in the zips. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's a lot of information. We found one really bizarre one that the developers had obviously been told, hey, don't use a CSV for your API anymore because it's really old and no one uses CSV anymore, you should use JSON. So all they did was wrap their CSV stuff in JSON and then split it out the JSON and then parse the CSV. So yeah, they were using JSON, great, good job. Some apps do clever things to get around the detection of analytics. A lot of the analytics data was in GET requests. Some of it was all encoded, some of them were sending in batches, so instead of contacting every time you did something, they'd wait until you'd done 10 clicks, and then send a whole load of them in a nice bundle that could then be processed and split up. We found one that instead of sending anything, they went, look, we're sending no parameters, it's great, we're not sending up any information. They put literally everything in the user agent. So the user agent was about 3,000 or 4,000 characters long, and it sent off your, more than just OM on iOS, it sent off your location, your a UUID, everything you'd just done and all of that sort of thing. So I must have been using a dynamic user agent, which is a bit weird and probably doesn't help the server deal with it very much. And future research. More digging is definitely required. This was a project that got delayed because of the difficulties with parsing the files. And unfortunately only really took off about last Friday to start getting information. There's an awful lot of data that I've got that I can't actually make use of yet, but will be looking into in the future. A more effective way of pulling out that information would be great. My script was thrown together. I'm the king of writing Python scripts that kind of just work until you give them something a bit unusual, then they break, cry, then I cry. So a nice automated way of pulling out the information would be really good to get. Checking Android apps, as I said, the Android permissions model up until, what's the word they call it, Marshmallow, the next build, was kind of broken, and if you didn't want to give an app permissions, you just didn't install it. And also, I don't know what information apps are allowed to access, like MAC address or Wi-Fi host name, phone network, etc. Would be quite interesting to find that out. Speaking of that, some apps I reckon have a fail when they can't get your network, because I was using an iPhone that didn't have a SIM card in it, and yet I had a request that said it was on O2, had a request that said it was on Vodafone. I think I had one of the other phone networks as well, which wasn't true because there was no SIM card. But I think some of them just kind of go, yeah, you're probably on the network. We'll just guess one. Not entirely sure what was going on there. Again, if anyone's come across it, please let me know because I'm curious. And that's it. I really have flown through that. As I say, if anyone's got any questions.
I've got a point and then I've got a question.
Okay.
So in your GET request,
Yes.
where it said MAC address unavailable,
Yes.
I believe it also said the iOS version was 8.1?
8.12. Yes.
So in, I think iOS 6, they retired some of the APIs to access some
Okay.
device-specific identifiers, and in iOS 7 they went even further, specifically designed to stop ad networks tracking people. So
Right.
that was a point where it started to become a big concern. So that's probably why that is, and I expect if you go back to older versions of iOS, it will work and will give you an address.
Right.
And then when you were talking about the applications that were failing open for the SSL pinning,
Yes.
did you report that to the vendor or something?
We've not done yet. As I say, this research, we basically managed to actually look at what was happening very recently. There's a lot of, as I say, it's an ongoing project. And I'll need to see what, because this has been done as NCC research, I'll need to go to them and sort out reporting of these issues. And then also we'll need to verify again, so we've done these tests briefly once on one phone. So we'll need to check again, and I didn't have time to go through it. It took about an hour and a half to install 10 apps each time. That's why there was an awful lot of coffee involved. Yep.
Yeah, just talking about the SSL certificate checking, TLS.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
No.
Just, have got the numbers for what proportion of the apps you did were trying to use HTTPS request, but were not getting the certificate?
I actually don't.
I've done some similar research and I got about a seventh of mine.
I don't have the numbers on me. I do have access on my laptop to the numbers that were successfully circled. This kind of, we refined our methodology as we went on, and it can really be done with being done again right from the start. You kind of get halfway through research and then go, I wish I'd been recording that the whole time.
Yeah.
So if I were to do it again, that would definitely be one of the things that would be interesting to look into.
Just think that the question you saying about when it invents a network for you.
Yes.
If the device has recorded the previous ICCID number from a SIM card that's been in it, it might associate that with a particular network.
Right.
Maybe.
That could be what it was doing. As I said, I don't know. I just know that sometimes it appeared to be randomly guessing. But then that wouldn't explain why different apps were sending different networks.
No.
So yeah, that's not really. If it consistently said O2, great, the phone's been used on O2, but it kind of just guessed.
Is the phone connected to a network for emergency purposes?
No.
If it doesn't have a SIM card, it's still
Does it still-
useful.
Yeah, emergency numbers will still work.
Right. Could have been that. That's a good thought. Actually, I hadn't considered that.
It may have been just pulling up a list of all available networks and then picking the first one or something based on signal strength.
Yeah, or if the baseband was linked to a particular network, maybe.
Yeah.
That could also make sense. I know this talk was kind of quick, but part of the reason I was doing it was to encourage people as well to show how easy it is to get some form of information out of apps. It's really, really easy to tunnel your phone through Burp. I know that 2 months ago I didn't know it was possible. Should have done, but I'd never seen it done before. Decided that the person who did it was a wizard. So yeah, it's kind of just an interesting one to see how easily accessible that information is. Yeah, sure.
Have you ever found sort of web APIs or whatever at the other end of the connection and tested those APIs to see whether you think they would be vulnerable sort of, separately to whatever the app is?
No.
Obviously you can't sort of go and test.
Yeah, we weren't actually, as I say, we were doing everything on device, and we weren't even, Burp was doing nothing more than intercepting and recording traffic, so it wasn't doing I wasn't sending APIs, malformed packets, or anything like that. On the subject of APIs, people really need to think of a good way of picking versioning numbers. Most of them are as bad as Valve and can't count to 3. A few of them are using 3, one of them was using 4, one of them was API version 7.3 point something. Surely by the time you've written your API 6 times, you kind of just realise that you should stick with one. because it wasn't a company that had been around all that long.
Just a question around the obfuscation that we're seeing
Yeah.
with a number of the requests. I mean, this type of behaviour sort of what typically is fairly layered, basic obfuscation techniques is something that we see quite a lot in malicious software as well.
Yes.
And a lot of the malware authors are using that around distribution and delivery of payloads and stuff. Given the interest that a lot of the authors of malware have in the mobile space at the moment, because of the popularity of it, what do you think was the scariest technique that you saw the legitimate advertising and analytics guys using that the malware authors might be able to put to use?
I think the double base 64ing and then zipping was quite an interesting one, because it was sending legitimate data that it had legitimately acquired from the device. I didn't realise it was a zip at all until someone else that had seen it before pointed it out. So again, it's one of these things that once you've seen it, people are going to be aware of it. Putting things in the user agent was quite an interesting one, because at the start I was only looking for, I got Burp to filter by any requests that had parameters. So obviously I would have missed that user agent one at first, and it was just by complete coincidence I Control-C at a random point in the program and went, that's a big user agent, that doesn't look right.
That's why it sort of stuck out to me as well, because they're both techniques that have been used by malware authors
Yeah.
in recent times.
I didn't really come across anything else that I particularly thought of as, oh, that would be great in malware, but I've done no work in malware analysis at all. Good question. Yes?
Looking at it sort of more of a, sort of stepping away from this and more towards the end conclusions, and I know it's probably a bit early to be looking at this, but was there anything that jumped out as something that an end user can do, you know, sort of taking all this information, putting something proactive together for an end user as advice? Is there anything that's left out at the moment, or anything that's starting to form a little bit?
I hadn't even considered that. The first thing that I would be suggesting is ant blocks of some variety, but they obviously require, I believe they require jailbroken or rooted phones. I don't think there's any you can get legitimately, and you don't really want to be encouraging absolutely everyone to go around jailbreaking their phones, because that would end well. Other than that, I actually can't think of anything off the top of my head. And it would be another thing that would be interesting to research.
It is something I'm, you know, more experienced with Android apps, and like you say, you know, it's pretty much, yes, I trust this app to do what it says and nothing more,
Yeah.
or I'm not going to use this app.
I believe that's changing in whatever the next version number
Yeah,
is, not given up and keeping track. But
It is supposed to be, but, you know, all part of this is, can you actually trust the app to do what it says it's going to do, you know, so.
this research was also done as part of a group who are looking into general API use, so they may have some other ideas as well, but it's not something that I've looked at.
I think one thing to call out in that space is that the value in this data to these analytics firms and marketing firms is huge.
Yeah.
And if a route to get that is stopped, they're not just going to walk away and walk away from all the money they've been earning. They're going to find another way of getting access to the data that they need.
So something else, just follow on from that. It'd be interesting if you can get a bit of budget to see if paid apps, in particular, and if there's a certain category, you know, sort of, do you spend £1 on an app, £5 on an app? Are they more or less targeted than maybe like a free app, where you kind of know you're paying for the app with your information? You know, it's kind of a given, but maybe there might be some value in expanding it that way as well.
So as I say, the methodology for this was definitely refined as we went. It started with, here's a phone, here's a laptop, go do some research. And it did get better as we go. It would be great to be more thorough and more scientific in the way we test, and also, as you say, get better samples from each area and actually record, as we mentioned, which apps are actually circling, which apps are failing open, and whether there are any trends between free and paid apps. It would definitely be interesting. It's definitely on the further research list. Any other questions?
What made you pick Apple? You say you don't really like Apple yourself, and Android has probably got more holes in it than whatever. Why?
We thought this research would go quicker than it did. So I did iPhone first and planned on moving on to Android. And just, I realised that if I wanted to actually have anything to say at this talk, rather than, hey, here's 800 burp files, you guys can go through them yourselves, I had to get one done. But the script I've written will work for, because it's just burp files, it will work on the Android apps. So it's now just a case of downloading them, running them, doing the same thing again. So if any of you want to download 10 apps, put them through burp and send me them, great. Cool. Thanks for listening, guys.